All right, welcome to a 10-minute Texans talk. It's been a while since I did one of these. It's kind of how I got started in making YouTube videos before I started with the bullpen. But yeah, let's do. I felt like it was time to bring this back. I was trying to find a forum in which to do it. I feel like now is the perfect time. We'll just talk right now about what's going on with the Texans. I don't know about daily. Probably try and drop one of these whenever major things happen. The past 2 days have been pretty major for the Texans. Trading was not what I thought would be at the forefront. I know I put out a tweet before free agency started that was like, okay, Texans fans, buckle up. It's going to be a wild week. And I was more getting at what I thought like the rest of the league would be doing relative to the Texans and how that was going to affect them. I didn't really think the Texans were going to be super in the mix, but it turns out I was wrong. I mean, so let's start with the Laremy Tunsil trade. That's obviously a clear front runner for like biggest move. I don't like the compensation they got back. I'm going to be clear about that, but I do like the move. I think I don't know if I've articulated this very well, but like a lot of people are like, how is he adversely affecting the locker room in terms of leadership? And I'll say this, that people are bringing up the clip from the Pivot podcast where CJ said, Laremy doesn't practice or whatever. And that's part of it. I mean, it's just the persona he carried. It's a blessing and a curse to be skilled at something, because when you're skilled at something, people think you are now a leader in that field. And so Laremy Tunsil was very clearly the best player on the Texans offensive line. And with that was expected to be a leader, but I don't think he really carried the traits of a leader. And so at the end of the day, it boiled over to the example he was setting for the young guys, the culture that he was setting on the O-line as a leader. And I said this in the middle of the season, right? The position of team captain is voted on by the players. And I said either the players are not a very good judge of character, or, Laremy Tunsil is a great leader and we're not seeing it. I don't want to say I was right or wrong on that one, but I talked about throughout the season the potential to trade, well, not throughout the season, but towards the middle, later part of the season, the possibility of trading Laremy Tunsil. I know that one of the first major outlets I saw bring that up was ESPN 97.5. From what I saw, there could have been other people talking about it, but one of the first major local outlets I saw bring that up was ESPN. Shout out, I believe it was either Jeremy Branham or John Grantano, or I don't know. I can't remember who brought it up, but one of the shows proposed it. I like the idea of moving on a total cultural reset, because the problem with this Texans offensive line is at least partially a cultural one. And so I looked at, and I said throughout the season, the Texans needed to address every possible potential cause, because we can't for sure say it was one thing or another. We can say that you think it was the coaching. It was probably mostly the coaching. You could say it was a skill issue, or you could say that it was a culture issue. So the Texans have, in a way, addressed every single potential issue with the Texans offensive line. So with that in mind, I like the trade. I think that moving on from Tunsil, even with the capital you get, is good right now. One of the things that's going to affect the way I view the grade on the trade over time is going to be the Texans' ability to utilize the capital they got from the trade, or just in general, get better on the offensive line, which I think over time will happen. You look, I think Titus Howard is marginally not as good at left tackle as Tunsil. I think when he stepped in, he was very serviceable. So I do like the move of how Aaron Wilson reported that Titus Howard will be left tackle. I like that a lot. I think that as good as Laremy Tunsil was as a left tackle, there's only so much that's useful when the interior offensive line literally is Swiss cheese. So I am all for moving to try, and it's a difficult market to do it in. The free agency is not good. Draft, whatever, we'll see. Could be deep, could not be. Varied reviews on that one. But I think that the Texans' ability to move past this could very well look a lot better with hindsight than it does now, which is most things. But I think that the Texans can drastically improve the offensive line overall, even though they moved on from their best player. And that's all I'll say on that. Now, another trade that happened was the trade of Kenyon Green. They sent Kenyon Green to Philly for C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a 5th and 6th round pick swap of sorts. I think they're picking up some of Kenyon Green's contract, but in general, Gardner Johnson's contract is easier to take on than Kenyon Green's. I think that trade's a product of the guard market. I think that Philly was more inclined to take a young guy with some team control and try and make something of him. They have a great O-line coach, so it's a great situation for Kenyon, and I wish him the best. It wasn't going to work out in Houston, so you'll never hear me say that I don't like this trade, regardless of how it pans out. It would take very much like a total crash out from CJ Gardner-Johnson that like super adversely affected the team, where we would have been better off without him, for me to believe that was not the right move. Overall, I mean, I think a lot of Texans fans were expecting Kenyon Green to be traded for like a bag of chips, a really late round pick. So anything, CJ Gardner-Johnson is a great pickup for the Texans because he solves a problem that means the Texans don't have to use draft capital on safety. He's a manageable contract, so they don't have to overspend in free agency to get a new safety. And it very clearly slots Jimmy Ward as the number 3 safety behind Bullock and Gardner Johnson. And I know what you're thinking, Jalen Petre's a safety. He mostly plays nickel, so I'm going to kind of categorize him as that. He's more of a, like we've talked about before, star safety, whatever. There's still 2 safeties on the roster that aren't Jalen Petre that slot ahead of Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward, I think, could get significant run at nickel to give Jalen Petre a break because of that, if he makes the roster. And that brings up a good point, which is that a lot of the moves the Texans have made this offseason are moves that I didn't believe that they would do because they were kind of committed to the status quo. So with that, there are moves that become more, I don't want to say likely, but more of a possibility as time moves on, which is the moving on from Dalton Schultz and moving on from Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward probably more likely than Schultz, but those are both moves that become possibilities because of the moves we've seen, moving on from Slowick, moving on from Tunsil, moving on from Shaq Mason. Those are all things that give credence to the possibility that the Texans are more interested in getting better as a team than they are managing those assets in a way that most teams would. But, I mean, time will tell with that one. So, I like the trade. It's hard not to like the trade where Kenyon Green leaves the roster and a new talent comes in. And like I said, I think that the Eagles might get more out of him. I would not be mad if the Eagles and their O-line coach, who I've heard is really good, turn Kenyon Green into a guy that consistently contributes. He's been described as depth going that way. So do with that information what you will. But overall, really like it. And I like the moves the Texans have made. Just briefly to talk about it, I mean, Sheldon Rankins coming back. You compare Sheldon Rankins and you re-sign Mario Edwards. That's the best of both years that D'Amico's been head coach in terms of interior defensive line paired together. That is a position the Texans have drawn production out of regardless of who they've got. Mostly one-year contracts, no real superstars. And so I really, they could have really signed anyone. I probably would have been okay with it. But I do like that they brought back known commodities to some extent. And I kind of hope that Nick Caley can take a page from D'Amico's playbook and work with Cole Popovich to make O-line something the Texans can just throw someone into and get the best out of. But I'm not holding my breath for that one. It's a massive turn. But looking at like the Chiefs overhauling their offensive line in season is like something they did that helped them win a Super Bowl, but it's a rare feat. So I'm not holding my breath on that. And I think improvement is what I'm looking for from the offensive line this season. Yeah, and then so Jake Hansen coming back. There's some special teams moves. There's a lot going on in the first 2 days of free agency. I think the Texans, I don't want to say they've gotten better as a team. It's a little early to tell. I need to see the totality of it, but I like the direction that it's heading in. And yeah, I don't know if you'll hear a lot of people with the Titus Howard to left tackle, with Laremy Tunsil leaving. I think it'd be pretty unanimous. People like the Kenyon Green move, but those other 2 moves are ones that are probably going to draw mixed reviews. But you won't hear me complain about either. Nothing the Texans have done this offseason has made me frustrated. I think the one thing is knowing that Stephon Diggs is not likely to come back means that there was a second-round pick that could have been used to build this team that was wasted on a rental that didn't even last the whole year before getting injured, and that's frustrating. But so far, I'm pretty content with it. I'm going to reserve any joy about it because Nick Caserio is not shown to be able to build an interior offensive line, and he hasn't really had to make any moves in the tackle position. So as a GM, it's one of his weak points. I'm interested to see how he approaches it, but overall, really happy with the first 2 days of free agency for the Texans. Like I said, it's not necessarily a daily thing, these 10-minute Texans talk, but whenever I feel like it needs to happen, whenever something significant happens, I want to, record one of these. So hopefully the quality turned out good on this. I'd hate to have rambled for so long just to hear static. I mean, I feel like the camera's probably gonna be shaky. But anyway, enough with the fourth wall breaks. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening to me talk about the Texans. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. Make sure you check out the bullpen. Tom and I are live every Monday talking Texans during the offseason. Obviously, except for this past Monday, life, whatever. Had stuff going on. But yeah, and as always, you can find me at James Roy NFL wherever you get social media. And also, as always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans.